I found myself utterly clueless about the unfolding situation, spending countless hours harboring doubts about my husband. This was nearly a decade ago when I was in my 30s and had recently tied the knot with him. Despite his relentless commitment to work even before our marriage, I anticipated a challenging life together. However, the prolonged periods of his absence left me feeling isolated. Initially, I tried to let him unwind during the scarce moments he was home, but my frustration mounted. As time passed, my demeanor towards him turned harsh. Each time I encountered his face, my husband attempted to pacify me. However, if he sensed my dissatisfaction persisted, he started to ignore my grievances. I yearned for his attention, despite the demands of his profession, simply because we were married. This sentiment overwhelmed me, preventing me from objectively assessing our relationship. My emotions got the better of me, and I could no longer view my husband objectively. Every argument led him to promise settling down soon and visiting the island I loved. Yet these assurances remained unfulfilled. Frustrated, I questioned the priority of work over our relationship, expressing my weariness at his constant excitement that saddened me. No matter how hurtful my words, my husband never took them seriously. A nagging feeling crept in that our marriage was on the brink of collapse. He sensed my indifference, and soon after, I began to suspect infidelity. Initially, I dismissed it, attributing his frequent business trips to the nature of his job. However, the discovery of a hotel receipt and membership card in his suit pocket raised suspicions. It indicated stays on days he claimed to be on business trips, accumulating points for multiple nights. As a successful professional, my husband was popular with his female colleagues, leading me to speculate about his involvement with another woman. Fed up, I decided to lead my life independently, disregarding his infidelity. The initial enjoyment of this newfound freedom waned as I grew weary of pretending to be happy. The realization dawned that perhaps it was time for both of us to break free from a marriage where we were avoiding each other as husband and wife. Accepting the possibility that my husband might find happiness elsewhere, I contemplated moving on to the next chapter of my life. Despite the lingering love for the man I once adored, the realization hit me that I no longer wished to spend my life with him. Summoning courage, I initiated the process of seeking a divorce, grappling with the idea that there might be no alternative but to end our union. Days of deliberation led me to send a text message to his cell phone, asking him to come home early. "I need to talk to you," I texted him on his cell phone. "I need to talk to you too, and I'll try to leave as soon as possible," he replied promptly. Despite being certain about my decision to seek a divorce, I found myself contemplating that my husband might not want the same. The realization that he, too, was seeking a divorce sent my heart racing, making it hard to breathe as I struggled to stand. His heart, it seemed, had moved on to someone else. "Let's not cry anymore," I thought, resolving to end things with a smile. I made my decision and patiently waited for my husband to return home. Around 9 p.m., he arrived, noticeably having lost an unexpected amount of weight. His kind eyes and familiar tone remained, yet an insurmountable gap existed between us. Despite his usual reticence, my husband, a man of few words, kept looking down and stayed silent as I spoke. Wanting to conclude our conversation with respect, I sensed he might be mocking me, which fueled my anger. Although our marriage had been short-lived, we were on the brink of divorce, and I expected him to share his feelings. As frustration mounted, I began to argue with him, but my husband remained silent, attentively listening to my words. Desiring any response, I revealed my knowledge of his new girlfriend, thinking he might be unaware. To my surprise, he looked at me with astonishment and briefly smiled. After a pause, he asked, "What did you know?" Strangely, his joking tone made me laugh, and for the first time in a long while, we shared laughter together, irrespective of the gravity of our conversation. I was elated to share laughter with my husband, reminiscent of our happier times. After that, we engaged in conversation, and there was an odd sense of connection, perhaps because he knew I was aware of the affair. My husband's face seemed rejuvenated as he suggested putting an end to our hostilities. I don't want to leave you because I don't like you, he admitted. Agreeing to my proposal, we decided to clean our room and divide our possessions, turning each item into precious memories, though some were meant to be kept hidden. My husband, typically attached to his belongings, surprised me by readily discarding them. Take anything you want. It's all my fault. This is my atonement, he declared. As we tidied up the room and only our belongings remained, his eyes seemed to well with tears. The sadness he felt mirrored my own, evident in the shared task of cleaning up the mess. Taking a break for the rest of the day after the cleanup, I decided to clear my mind with a bath. While I contemplated seeking compensation from my unfaithful husband, the realization hit me that our relationship had already ended. As I prepared for bed, my husband entered the bedroom, climbed in, and gently embraced me. This is weird, and I feel bad for your girlfriend, I remarked. My husband, trembling, expressed a desire to be by my side one more time. Although I stiffened slightly, he held me close, and when I asked if he was crying, he remained silent. Stroking his back, I noticed the changes in his body, lighter and more bony. Concerned, I asked if he was okay, and he revealed that he had been intentionally losing weight. Pulling away, he took a deep breath and assured me he was fine. Despite my surprise at the transformation, my husband explained that his new physique was preferred by his new companion. Disheartened, I wondered why he couldn't forget about me if he was happy with her. In a moment of sarcasm, I made a comment about tears, trying to keep my sadness at bay. My husband, unfazed, acknowledged my familiar traits, expressing his wish for my happiness from the next day onward. As he lightly snored, I realized he was a man who moved at his own pace until the very end. I hoped for a peaceful future as well and fell asleep after murmuring to my husband's sleeping face. The next day, I'd overslept due to staying up late cleaning the room. Upon waking, I discovered my husband was no longer in bed. In the living room, I found an A4-size envelope on the table. Opening it revealed a bank book, various documents related to marital property, an unusually large sum of money in my name, and divorce papers in a small envelope. My husband's section was already filled, leaving me in a panic. Attempting to contact him, I discovered his phone was disconnected, seemingly canceled. My inquiries with his parents and friends yielded no information. Contacting his company, I learned he had resigned a few months before, a surprising revelation for a workaholic. I grew suspicious of people and struggled to find a way to contact my husband. The mental fatigue, building up since before the divorce, almost crushed me. Despite my husband arranging compensation for me, I now felt free. Deciding to spend time in a place I truly enjoyed, I arrived at a remote island, a day's journey from the mainland. With a sparse population of around 3,000 people, I had visited it once with my husband and was captivated by its natural beauty and unhurried pace. My husband had promised we would return to the island after completing his work. Though I missed him, I realized that what I needed now was the peace and quiet of that place. Quitting my job and moving to the remote island a few months later, I rented out my house to someone else. It was a risky move, but I knew I couldn't stay in my previous home any longer. As for how my husband paid off the mortgage, that remained uncertain. Knowing that my husband had worked hard to create the memories in our house, I found it challenging to continue living there alone. Despite the strangeness of some things, I couldn't seek answers from him anymore. Wanting to honor his efforts, I decided not to let go completely. Choosing to spend time on his quiet island, I started adjusting to island life and got to know my neighbors. Though I had enough assets to live without working, I discovered that idleness was more depressing. As a sort of helper, I began assisting elderly neighbors with their concerns. Initially treated as an outsider, I felt relieved as I gradually became accepted as one of the islanders. One day, a co-worker informed me that a new client had arrived from the main island for medical treatment. Facing a serious illness, he had chosen this island as his final residence due to the lack of available treatment elsewhere. Concerned about his condition and aware of the challenges of moving to an island without medical facilities, I was hesitant about taking charge. However, when he asked for a visit and I was the only one available, I nervously went to his house. Arriving at a small house on a hill with an ocean view, I questioned if it was the best place for someone in his condition. Running the doorbell, a faint voice invited me in. As I entered, I found the client sitting in front of a window, with the sun and wind streaming in. Squinting to see his face, I greeted him, only to be rendered speechless. To my astonishment, my ex-husband sat before me. Both of us were taken aback, just standing there and staring. My husband broke the silence, mischievously smiling, admitting that I have found him out. Confused by his unexpected presence and the conflicting information, I was unable to speak properly. My husband took my hand, forcing me to sit beside him. As we sat there in silence, a voice at the door interrupted our thoughts. Wiping my tears, I'd opened the door to an elderly man who seemed surprised by my tear-stained face. He bowed, entered, and sat next to my husband. Softly inquiring about his well-being, he spoke in a gentle voice. My husband assured the elderly man that everything was normal, and they began chatting. Realizing that the elderly man was likely the island's only doctor, I recalled colleagues mentioning the absence of inpatient facilities and how the clinic nurse and doctor were crucial lifelines for the island. It became apparent that my husband had come to the island to spend his final days here. Despite his decision, I listened attentively to their conversation. After the brief conversation with my husband's doctor, who left after about 10 minutes of casual discussion, I couldn't resist running after him. Startled by my flustered appearance, he seemed to understand when I explained our relationship. Anxious about my husband's condition and future treatment, I questioned the doctor, but he insisted he couldn't disclose anything without my husband's consent. With a heavy heart, the doctor shared that my husband wouldn't be able to walk by himself soon and suggested that it would be a shame for him to spend his final days alone, urging me to be there for him. Stunned by this revelation, I returned to the house where my husband was waiting, seemingly anticipating my inquiries. Greeting me with a smile, my husband acknowledged that he couldn't live without me, so I requested to spend the night. My husband's house, now reduced to a few pieces of luggage and a couple of futons, became the backdrop for the first night we slept together since discussing divorce. Under the covers, we shared the story of how we had arrived at this unexpected juncture. Eager to inquire about his illness, I decided it wasn't the right time for painful discussions. Instead, we reminisced about our past, partly influenced by my feelings about his past relationship. Wondering if he hadn't brought his girlfriend to the island before I requested to stay, my husband simply laughed, covering up the unspoken sadness. Mindful of his feelings, I refrained from probing further. The next day, I informed my employer of the situation and decided to take some time off. Determined to spend what time my husband had left with him, I took him around the island in a wheelchair, revisiting places I remembered and exploring new ones. It was satisfying just being together, and I wished we had been open with each other during our marriage. Despite the challenges, my feelings for him grew stronger even after our divorce, and I resolved to stay by his side like a friend. As his disease progressed, my husband's physical strength deteriorated to the point where daily tasks became difficult. The doctor visited every day, offering the only relief that my husband was no longer in pain. Witnessing the toll the disease took on him, I nursed him tirelessly, never leaving his side. Gradually, my husband stopped waking up, and I continued to sit by his side, reading his favorite books and describing the sights and sounds around us. Despite his limited responsiveness, I cherished every moment, and my love for him intensified my sadness. Eventually, the day arrived when he stopped waking up altogether. I held his hand, telling him about beautiful sunsets and the world outside, even though he couldn't respond. When his hand grew cold and his breathing became unnatural, panic set in, and I called the doctor. The doctor arrived promptly, confirming that my husband's blood pressure had dropped significantly. He suggested letting him go in peace and assured me that my husband wanted me to stay with him. Despite the sorrow, The doctor stayed true to his word, being there if anything happened. As my husband took his last breath and passed away quietly, I couldn't stop crying. Yet, I found solace in being there for him until the end. The following days were a blur as I dealt with the practicalities and mourned after the burial. Returning home after organizing my husband's belongings, I noticed a pile of letters, accumulating like a mountain. Intrigued, I discovered my husband's nostalgic handwriting on each one. Reading through them, I realized he had written dozens of letters, starting from the day of our reunion. His letters became shorter and messier as the days passed, revealing the progression of his illness. Among them, one letter revealed the truth about our divorce. His illness had started during our marriage, and he had planned to divorce me, not wanting me to spend my life caring for him. My husband's words were painful, and I felt hurt by the way he had orchestrated everything. Apologizing sincerely, tears flowed uncontrollably. Suddenly, there was a knock on the front door. Wiping my tears, I opened it to find the doctor standing there. He handed me a sealed envelope, identical to the ones I had just read. My husband had asked him to post a few days' worth of letters before falling into a coma, entrusting them to the doctor. This was the last letter. Thanking the doctor, I read my husband's final note alone. It was a thin but clear message. "Thank you, I love you. Despite the pain," I said aloud, "I love you too." In that moment, I thought I saw my husband's portrait smile a little. Decades after my husband's death, I am officially recognized as an island resident. Building a grave next to where his house used to stand, I have chosen to stay on the island. Every day, I gaze out the window, just like my husband used to do. One day, I intend to join him there, finding peace and happiness surrounded by the memories we created together.